Hello, class. So let's talk about chapters 2 and 3 in the text. One of the concepts that the authors talk about is that of competitive advantage. Obviously, the purpose of every business is to make money, and the best way to make money is to achieve monopoly, meaning you are the only business that is offering that particular product or service, and so there's no competition and you can set your price. Now, in the United States, there are laws against monopoly, although the government often helps organizations sort of into monopoly or into some tightly controlled groups of a few companies offering a service, which are called oligopolies. So one example is the airline industry. There's really very few carriers when you think about it. Train travel is in that same sector that functions in a similar fashion. You have to pass through all sorts of hurdles to start up a business, and it's almost impossible to do that in that field. So anyway, you're trying to achieve competitive advantage in any way that you can, meaning gaining market share over your competitors and allowing your business to grow and hopefully for your profits to increase. So when you're trying to come up with a way to do that, you look at the business environment. And the environment is the external conditions around your business that determine sort of how and when and what you can get away with in terms of actions. So in the environment you have pressures. One pressure is market pressure, meaning are there competitors? If you look at the telecom industry right now, especially for wireless service for cell phones, you have AT&T and Verizon, which are the leaders, Sprint, which has a smaller market share. Then you have a company like T-Mobile that's putting a lot of pressure on the market right now because they are trying to come up with unique ways to offer pricing plans and services. So that's an example of market pressure. There's technology pressure. And again, we can look at cell phones. You lose a lot of money in that industry if you don't have a new product to offer with upgraded tech right before the holiday season. So you'll see Apple and Samsung and those types of companies sort of scrambling to put something out right before the buying season starts for the holidays. There's societal pressure, which includes political issues, legal issues, general trends in culture. So an example of societal pressure could be the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which affects the accounting practices of publicly traded companies. And so you have to keep data in a certain way and be able to present that to the government and other consumers. Another example is, let's say, gay marriage, that in the last couple of years there's been quite a swing in terms of popular opinion about the acceptable nature of gay marriage. And so if you're a business that, let's say, makes cakes, that's an example that a lot of the politicians use. You own a bakery and you want to make cakes, and a gay couple wants a cake for their wedding and you refuse. There's going to be a lot of societal pressure on whether that's even legal for you to decline to make that cake. So you're trying to navigate through all these environmental pressures and you come up with a competitive strategy. And you keep in mind in the text they show you Porter's competitive forces, which means that your suppliers for your products are putting pressure on you, your customers are putting pressure on you, some of your own internal departments are putting pressure on you, so that affects how you develop the strategy. And there's a couple of different ways that you can succeed, a couple of different types of strategies that you can use, one of which is make yourself cheap, which is what Walmart did. When they came out, they said, we're going to have the cheapest products around, and we're going to go for the low cost on everything, and basically the cost-conscious customer. You can make yourself different. When Southwest Airlines came out, and for a long time they marketed themselves as a short run, meaning they did kind of short little hopping flights. They weren't going to have assigned seating. They were going to not take themselves too seriously, so they joked around a lot, and that separated them from their competitors. You can also offer something new. So when Apple came out with the iPod, that was a completely new way of listening to music and interacting with entertainment. So I saw some of this firsthand, like 15 years ago or so. One of my national accounts with a construction materials manufacturer that I worked for was actually Chipotle. And of course, Chipotle is now exploding. They're a restaurant that offers sort of Southwestern food that is as organically obtained as possible. So they let you know who their suppliers are and what the requirements are, no antibiotics and so forth. And you can get in and out of the restaurant quickly and have a really delicious meal. And so 15 years ago, they had this strategy and to have these small stores, and they're kind of designed in sort of an industrial fashion, concrete floors, no real ceiling. It's just kind of the open rafters and the ductwork. And so that really differentiated them from their competitors, the type of food and the type of ambiance that they had in the restaurants. And obviously they've been really successful with that. So another way of another type, I should say, of competitive strategy is to be more efficient. So UPS is a company that constantly measures how long their drivers spend loading packages, how long they spend on routes, how long they spend delivering packages, and they're often on really tight schedules because they're told almost to the second how long it should take them to move those items along. And then finally, a strategy is to be customer oriented. And we talked about in the last lecture the shift from personal relationships in business to data collection. I'm reading a book now on predictive marketing, which is related to MIS and all this kind of stuff we're talking about. And they are really outlining the shift in business from focusing on your product, your own items or services, and pushing those on customers to focusing on customer needs and their purchasing patterns and clustering them into groups so that you could sell them more, identify what types of customers they were and how much you could make off of them over the lifetime of your relationship. So for all of those types of strategies and ways of achieving your goals in business, you need to achieve IT alignment, meaning you need your IT department to support the collection of all that data, whether it's your own internal processes or it is customer data to help you market and improve sales. And that can often be challenging because traditionally, especially in larger companies, the IT departments serviced each silo in the business in very different ways. So a lot of times they'd have systems that didn't talk to each other. IT personnel can sometimes be challenging to work with. They're often very bright. Sometimes there's some sort of social norms issues. They have a hard time communicating with other employees. And of course that's a generalization, but it can be one of the challenges with trying to communicate with technical people some real-world customer-oriented issues. So that's all part of the IT alignment. Another concept that your textbook speaks about in these chapters is big data. And I mentioned that a little bit in the first lecture. Basically, the more information you can collect on someone, the better. And the larger your sample size, and that's a statistics concept, the better your data is. So companies like Target use their red card to figure everything out about you that they can. So they're so successful at that in Minnesota they were contacted by a local father, and he was really angry at them because they were sending advertisements that he didn't really care for to his home. And he had a wife and a few children. One of the children was a teenage daughter. And it was a very conservative household. They were very religiously active and just conservative in all things, no smoking or drinking, that kind of thing. And he sort of took the general manager of that Target to task, saying, listen, you're really pushing a lifestyle onto my daughter that I don't like. You are encouraging her to be sexually active and to have children, and she's too young for that. I want her to be married first, and we don't appreciate this. So the general manager apologized for those ads, and a couple of months later followed up with the father to make sure that the ads had stopped. And what he found out was that the father was apologetic because he said to the general manager, you actually know what's going on in my household better than I do. My daughter is in fact pregnant. So how did Target know? Well, they were collecting data, and they know things not just because she bought a pregnancy test or something like that. They knew that because she bought unscented lotion and then 3 weeks later bought nutritional supplements, that there was like an 85% likelihood that she was pregnant. So that's an example of big data, and there are companies like Axion who have 1,500 data points on 96% of the households in America. So it's pretty scary, but effective for those businesses. And so a company like Axion will take that data and actually sell it off to other companies. So the problem with big data and really all data and MIS is data storage. That the textbook mentions data rot, meaning you cease to be able to access information. We used floppy drives a few years ago. You might still have your floppy drives and they may work, but you don't have a computer anymore that can read them. So that's a big issue. There's also an issue with data governance. Target actually had their point of sale system hacked a couple of years ago, and they lost some really personal information on their customers to hackers who can then sell it off to other criminals and that kind of stuff. And there's often legal ramifications for that. There's an issue with database construction. How do you set up the fields? How do you populate them? How do they interact with each other? How do people access this data? And you don't want the entire company having to contact the IT folks to perform an SQL search, which is a concept that's described in your textbook. You want them to be able to access that data sort of immediately on their own through a management system. And when you have so much data, you actually have to create metadata. And metadata is basically data about data. It's shorter bits of information that give brief descriptions and help organize larger chunks of data. So this whole concept comes down to knowledge management. The book lays out data is just little random snippets of we'll just, for lack of a better term, call it information. It's basically numbers or letters or something like that. The next level up is information, meaning this number is a GPA or it's an ERA in baseball. And then finally knowledge is, well, we know that if a student has a certain GPA that they're going to succeed in obtaining their business degree and earning that. So knowledge management is about pulling all this information together, using your information systems, and making decisions strategically to forward the aims of your business and gain competitive advantage. So that's just kind of an overview of what you're going to be reading in this week's chapters. Take care.